He was never meant to be a hero, just a quiet janitor, sweeping floors in the shadow of men who ruled the world with their wealth and power. But on one unforgettable day, in a courtroom where truth was supposed to matter, everything collapsed. A billionaire, abandoned, betrayed, left to fight alone, had no one on his side. No one, except the man everyone overlooked. What could possibly drive a janitor to step into a battle meant for lawyers and kings? And why would history try so hard to bury this story? For years, Marcus lived in the shadows of wealth he could never touch. A janitor in one of the city's tallest glass towers, he spent his nights polishing marble floors and wiping fingerprints from doors that opened only for the powerful. To most, he was invisible, just another uniform in the background, a man expected to stay silent and unseen. But Marcus carried himself with quiet dignity, the kind of strength born from years of swallowing disrespect and moving forward anyway. His world was simple, steady, long shifts, a modest paycheck, and the pride of knowing his work put food on the table. He never dreamed of crossing paths with the people whose names filled newspapers and stock reports. Yet fate has a way of shattering the ordinary when we least expect it. Because one evening, in a courthouse thick with tension, those worlds collided. A billionaire, cornered, betrayed, and left without defense, would look out into a sea of faces and find no one willing to stand by his side. No one, except Marcus. What could possibly drive a man overlooked his entire life to step into a fight that was never meant to be his? The courthouse was a theater of power. Men in expensive suits whispered behind polished tables, their voices sharp with strategy. But for Marcus, the janitor, it was a place he knew only through the echo of his mop on the marble floors. He had cleaned these very halls at night, invisible to the eyes of those who ruled them by day. Never had he imagined standing inside a courtroom while the drama unfolded in front of him. On this day, all eyes were fixed on the billionaire at the defense table. A man who had built empires with his name, whose money could silence critics and bend rules in his favor. Yet when the pressure mounted, when accusations flew, even his power cracked. His lawyer, paid handsomely to protect him, rose, adjusted his tie, and with a cold, calculated move, walked out. Abandonment in its purest form. The courtroom buzzed with shock. How could a man with limitless resources be left alone in the fight of his life? And yet, amid the chaos, one truth cut deeper. No one moved to help him. Not his allies, not his friends, not the men in suits who once bowed in his presence. He was left exposed. Marcus, watching from the sidelines, felt the weight of it. He had been overlooked, dismissed, treated as though his voice held no value. He knew the feeling of being invisible, but he also knew injustice when he saw it. Still, the thought of stepping forward seemed impossible. What right did a janitor have in the sacred halls of law? But the murmurs around him told a different story. Some smirked, whispering about the billionaire's downfall as if it were entertainment. Others exchanged knowing glances, as though watching justice twist into humiliation was more satisfying than truth. And beneath it all, Marcus felt something stir, an anger not just for the man on trial, but for the system that had always decided who was worthy of defense and who was left to rot. The billionaire lifted his eyes, searching the room for anyone, someone, to stand beside him. Their gazes locked just for a second. Marcus could have looked away. He could have told himself it wasn't his fight. But deep down, he knew he had already crossed the line, because once you recognize injustice, pretending not to see it becomes its own kind of betrayal. And so, with a single step forward, Marcus shattered the silence of the room. But what he didn't know was that stepping into that courtroom fight would not only change the billionaire's fate, it would change his own life forever. The courtroom froze as Marcus stepped forward. The sound of his shoes against the floor echoed louder than the gavel itself. Heads turned, eyes narrowed. A murmur rippled through the crowd. A janitor? Here? The judge's eyes flickered with annoyance. The attorneys scoffed, smirking as if this moment were beneath them. And from the jury box, a few exchanged glances that said everything without words. Disbelief that a black janitor dared to stand where power was meant to speak. Marcus felt every stare like a weight pressing down on his chest. He knew what they saw, not courage, not principle, but a man out of place, a man who should have stayed in the shadows. His voice trembled at first, but then grew steady as he spoke of what he had witnessed, of truth that others had chosen to ignore. The silence sharpened into hostility. Someone coughed in mockery. A lawyer leaned back, smirking as if waiting for Marcus to stumble. And in that moment, the divide in the room became painfully clear. A wealthy man, once untouchable, now abandoned. And a black janitor standing alone, daring to challenge the rules of power. For Marcus, it was more than defending a billionaire. It was about proving that justice was not the property of the privileged. The gavel slammed. Objections flew. The room turned into chaos. But Marcus did not move. He stood rooted in a truth bigger than himself. Because sometimes, the most powerful voice in the room isn't the loudest. It's the one nobody expected to hear at all. And in that moment, everyone realized this trial would never be the same again. When the dust settled, Marcus walked out of that courtroom not as a janitor, but as a man who had dared to challenge the silence. He had stood where no one expected him to stand. And in doing so, he proved something the system tried to bury. That courage is not measured by wealth, status, or education, but by the willingness to act when others look away. The billionaire's fate may have shifted that day, but the deeper truth was harder to ignore. A black man, dismissed his entire life as invisible, had been the only one to defend someone society claimed was untouchable. And yet, instead of respect, Marcus felt the weight of the stares, the whispers, the reminders that in the eyes of many, his place was still on the margins. That's the reality of racism. It doesn't vanish in a single victory. It lingers in the way people look at you, the way systems are built to remind you where they think you belong. But Marcus's stand was more than one moment in a courtroom. It was a reminder that silence allows injustice to thrive and that even the most overlooked voice can shake the walls of power. Because this story isn't just about Marcus. It's about every person who has ever been told they don't belong, every voice drowned out before it could be heard. So the question remains, how many more times must ordinary people risk everything just to prove that justice belongs to us all?